The moment you feel compelled to explain yourself at every accusation, you often surrender more influence than you realize. Picture the scene. Someone questions your competence in a meeting. A subtle remark lands at a family gathering. A partner interprets your words in the worst possible light. Instantly, your pulse rises. You feel an almost irresistible urge to correct the misunderstanding, provide context, and prove your innocence. And so you begin explaining. You clarify every detail. You justify every decision. You hope that if you simply provide enough evidence, the other person will finally understand. Yet people rarely judge confidence by the amount of information you provide. More often, they judge it by the manner in which you deliver it. Endless justification can unintentionally communicate uncertainty, while calm restraint often signals conviction. Niccolo Machiavelli understood that influence is shaped not only by facts, but by perception. One of the central dynamics of power is the ability to preserve your own frame of reference. When every criticism forces you into a defensive posture, you allow someone else to dictate the terms of the interaction. Instead of deciding what matters, you become occupied with answering accusations. But imagine responding differently. Instead of reacting immediately, you pause. You refuse to be rushed into defending yourself. You answer only when clarification serves a genuine purpose, not because someone demands it. That composure can be deeply unsettling to people who rely on provoking emotional reactions. The strongest position is not winning every argument. It is remaining centered enough that every criticism does not determine your next move, and they are pulled by the strings of other people's opinions. Someone frowns, they apologize. Someone accuses, they explain. They live in a constant state of reactive defense, trying to prove they are good, smart, or worthy. It is a miserable way to exist. It is a slow suffocation of the soul. But there is a different way. A way of moving through the world that is so detached, so sovereign, and so psychologically impenetrable that insults do not just bounce off you, they dissolve before they even touch you. This is not about being cold. It is not about being arrogant. It is about a fundamental shift in where you derive your reality. Today, we are going to dissect the psychology of the non-defense. We are going to look at why your biology betrays you in these moments and how to override it with a strategy that Machiavelli would have whispered to a prince. I am going to show you how to flip the power dynamic instantly, how to make the attacker doubt their own sanity, how to use silence not as an absence of noise, but as a weapon of mass destruction against someone's ego. But be warned, this requires you to kill a part of yourself that you have been feeding since you were a child, the part of you that begs to be understood, the part of you that needs permission. If you can kill that need, you become dangerous. You become untouchable. Let's begin. So, why do you do it? Why, when someone challenges you, is your first instinct to provide evidence of your innocence? It starts in childhood. Think back when you were 5 years old and a parent or a teacher accused you of something. 꼼. Many of us learn a pattern early in life. When something goes wrong, the safest response is to explain ourselves. I didn't break it, it fell. I wasn't the one who started it. As children, this often makes sense. Parents, teachers, and other authority figures have the power to reward or punish us, so we learn that our safety depends on convincing them we are innocent or well-intentioned. The challenge that this habit can follow us into adulthood. We may begin treating every disagreement as though the other person is an authority whose approval we must earn. A disagreement with a manager, a partner, a stranger online, or even a critic can unconsciously trigger the same instinct. If I can just explain myself well enough, everything will be okay. That reaction is understandable, but it is not always helpful. Machiavelli observed that influence depends as much on perception as on facts. Applied to modern relationships, one practical lesson is that respect often comes from composure rather than constant self-justification. When you immediately rush to defend every criticism, you risk communicating that your confidence depends on the other person's approval. When you respond selectively and calmly, you signal that your self-worth is not determined by every outside judgment. This does not mean refusing to clarify when clarification is necessary. There are situations, professional, legal, or personal, where explaining yourself is both wise and responsible. The key is intention. Explain because it serves your goals or protects what matters, not because you feel compelled to earn validation from everyone who questions you. Respect is built not by never speaking, but by choosing carefully when your words truly deserve to be heard. You are saying, please get me, please see my intent. But a king does not explain his decree to the peasant. A lion does not explain its hunt to the gazelle. The moment you start rambling, giving reasons, showing text, bringing up past events to prove your point, you have signaled that your internal stability depends on their agreement. You have given them the key to your house, and once they have that key, they can trash the place whenever they want. This is the trap of the validating self. You believe that if you just explain it clearly enough, they will say, "Oh, I see now. You are right. I was wrong." How often does that actually happen? Almost never, because the attack was never about the facts. And it was about the power. They didn't accuse you because they wanted the truth. They accused you to see if you would jump, and you jumped. The first step to becoming untouchable is to realize that the courtroom does not exist. There is no judge. There is no jury. There is only you and your perception of reality. When you stop treating other people like judges, their accusations stop sounding like sentences. They start sounding like opinions. And opinions are just noise. So what happens when you don't jump? Imagine the scenario. Someone throws a verbal spike at you. You're being incredibly selfish right now. The old you would say, "No, I'm not. I did X, Y, and Z for you yesterday. I'm just tired, defensive, weak, reactive." Now imagine the Machiavellian approach. They say, "You're being incredibly selfish right now." You look at them. You hold eye contact. You don't blink. You keep your face completely neutral. You let the silence hang in the air for 3, 4, 5 seconds. What happens when you choose not to react immediately? A quiet psychological space opens. Many people feel uncomfortable with silence during conflict because they expect an instant response. When that response never comes, the conversation changes. The other person may begin talking simply to relieve the tension they created, adding qualifications, softening their position, or explaining themselves without being asked. And in many situations, silence shifts the dynamic. Rather than feeding the conflict, you allow the other person's words to stand on their own. This reflects the idea behind the gray rock approach, remaining emotionally uninteresting so that someone seeking a reaction has nothing to work with. Without resistance, their momentum often fades naturally, as this is far more difficult than it sounds. Your instincts may urge you to interrupt, justify yourself, or deliver the perfect comeback. Self-control means recognizing that impulse without obeying it. Not every accusation deserves an immediate response, and not every silence is a sign of weakness. Sometimes it is a deliberate decision to avoid being pulled into someone else's emotional frame. Machiavelli often emphasized the strategic value of self-command. When you react impulsively, you reveal what matters most to you and what is capable of provoking you. When you remain composed, you reveal far less. That does not mean suppressing your emotions forever. It means choosing the right time, place, and audience before expressing them. The person who controls their reactions usually retains more influence than the person who reacts to every provocation. And now they know your insecurity is moral standing. Silence reveals nothing. It is a dark mirror. And when they look into it, they only see their own aggression reflected back, and it makes them uncomfortable. It makes them feel judged, which is ironic because you haven't said a word. Sometimes silence is not enough. Sometimes the situation requires words, but never defensive words. If you must speak, you never push back against the force. You pull it. You use the aikido of conversation. There's a concept in dark psychology called agree and amplify. It creates a state of cognitive dissonance in the attacker. If someone accuses you of something absurd, defending yourself validates the absurdity. It suggests the accusation is serious enough to warrant a response. Instead, you lean into it, you exaggerate it until it becomes a caricature. Attacker, you are so obsessed with money. You're greedy, defensive, you. No, I'm not. I just want to provide for my family. Boring, predictable, weak, Machiavellian, you. You caught me. I actually swim in a vault of gold coins like Scrooge McDuck every Tuesday. It's terrible for my back. You say it with a flat face or a slight amused smirk. What have you done here? You refuse to be insulted. You proved you are not insecure about the topic. You turned their serious attack into a joke. You established that you are the one framing the reality, not them. This strips the attacker of their weapon. They wanted to hurt you. Instead, you took their knife and started peeling an apple with it. It signals amused mastery. Amused mastery is the ultimate state of high status. It is the attitude of a parent watching a toddler throw a tantrum. You don't get angry at the toddler. You don't argue with the toddler. You are amused by the drama because you know you are safe. When you defend yourself, you are getting down on the floor and screaming with the toddler. Don't do that. Stand tall, stay composed. Sometimes the strongest response to a label is not to fight it at all. Robert Greene's The 48 Laws of Power discusses the idea of continually recreating yourself rather than allowing others to define you. When someone tries to place you in a narrow category, arguing against every label can unintentionally give that label more importance than it deserves. Humor can be an effective way to diffuse an unfair accusation. If someone says, "You're arrogant," a lighthearted reply such as, "I like to think of it as healthy confidence," can reduce tension without becoming defensive. If someone makes an exaggerated criticism, responding with calm wit instead of outrage communicates that your identity is not dependent on their opinion. The goal is not to belittle the other person, but to show that you are secure enough not to be shaken by every judgment. And people who are genuinely comfortable with themselves usually feel little need to defend every criticism. Someone who knows they are kind is less disturbed by an occasional accusation of selfishness. Someone who trusts their competence is less threatened by being underestimated. If a remark consistently provokes a strong emotional reaction, it can also become an opportunity for honest self-reflection. Why does this bother me so much? That question often reveals more than the criticism itself. Beneath many conflicts lies an invisible structure. One person assumes the role of the interrogator, asking questions and defining the terms of the conversation, while the other feels pressured to justify every action. You do not have to accept that role automatically. Instead of rushing into defense, you can pause, ask thoughtful questions of your own, or decide whether the discussion is worth continuing at all. The person who remains calm enough to choose the structure of the conversation often has more influence than the person who merely reacts within it. Whoever is answering is losing status. The most lethal Machiavellian trick is to simply refuse the role of defendant and seize the role of judge. You do this by answering a question with a question, or by analyzing their behavior instead of your own. Them. Why are you always so late defensive? You. There was traffic and my alarm didn't go off. Losing Machiavellian you. Why does my arrival time affect your mood so deeply? Boom. Do you see the shift? Suddenly we are not talking about the clock. We are talking about their emotional stability. We are talking about their reaction. You have put the spotlight back on them. Them, you're being ridiculous. Machiavellian you. What makes you feel the need to use labels like that to get your point across? You are psychoanalyzing them in real time. This is infuriating to a manipulator. They want you on your back foot. Instead, you are walking around them, observing them like a specimen in a jar. It's interesting that you perceive it that way. Does saying that make you feel better? You seem very invested in this. These phrases are shields. They acknowledge the sound coming out of the other person's mouth, but they do not accept the content. It is a boundary, a verbal force field. You are saying, this is your stuff, not mine. Keep it. This is not just a technique. It is a spiritual stance. It is the realization that other people's perceptions of you are none of your business. Their anger is their problem. Their disappointment is their responsibility to manage. When you defend, you are trying to carry their emotional baggage as for them. You are trying to fix their feelings. Resist the urge to carry every emotional burden that someone places on you. Let people take responsibility for their own reactions and their own choices. One of the most surprising ways to de-escalate conflict is not through forceful disagreement, but through calm acceptance of what is objectively true. Imagine someone is criticizing you, hoping to provoke an argument. Instead of rushing to defend yourself, you look at them and calmly say, "You're right, I did make that mistake." Then you stop. This approach is closely related to the communication technique known as fogging, acknowledging a reasonable point without becoming defensive or surrendering your self-respect. While the effect can be powerful, many confrontations depend on resistance. When someone expects an argument and instead receives calm agreement where appropriate, much of the emotional momentum disappears. It is like pushing hard against a door that suddenly swings open. The energy that was driving the conflict no longer has anything to push against. And the key distinction is this: acknowledge facts without accepting unfair conclusions. There is a significant difference between saying, "I made a mistake," and believing, "I am incompetent." If someone says, "This report contains errors," and that is true, admitting it demonstrates confidence. If they go further and conclude, "You're completely incapable," you are under no obligation to accept that judgment. You can own your actions without allowing someone else to define your identity. That balance accountability without self-condemnation is where real confidence begins. Power move. You're right. The report has errors. I'll fix it. Notice what was left out. You didn't address the incompetent part. You ignored the insult and addressed the fact. You took ownership of the action but not the identity. This signals immense confidence. Only a person who is secure in their competence can admit a mistake so easily. Insecure people fight to the death to prove they didn't make a mistake. Secure people say, "Oops, my bad," and move on. Machiavelli would call this disarming the enemy. If you lay down your sword, they look foolish holding theirs. It takes the wind out of their sails, it makes them look hysterical, and you look grounded. And in the long run, history is written by the grounded. None of this works if it is just a tactic. If you are using these lines but your voice is shaking, or your eyes are darting around, or your energy is screaming, "Please like me," it will fail. Dark psychology is 20% words and 80% nonverbal frame. You have to build the internal architecture to support the silence. And this brings us back to the shadow. Why does it hurt when they attack you? Because they are touching a wound that is already there. If I tell you you have green skin, you won't get mad. You'll think I'm crazy. You won't defend yourself. You'll laugh. But if I tell you you are a failure and you defend yourself, it's because a part of you suspects I might be right. The ultimate defense is not a verbal technique. It is self-knowledge. It is looking into your own darkness, owning your own flaws, and accepting your own shadow. When you know you are capable of selfishness, and someone calls you selfish, you say sometimes yes. When you know you are capable of cruelty, and someone calls you cruel, you say, "I can be." A person who has accepted their imperfections is much harder to manipulate through shame. When you no longer hide every flaw or mistake, criticism loses much of its power. Confidence does not come from pretending to be flawless. It comes from knowing your strengths, acknowledging your weaknesses, and refusing to let either define your worth. Instead of becoming a fortress that must defend every wall, you become flexible enough that attacks no longer determine your peace of mind. Here's a simple exercise to experiment with over the next 7 days. Call it no unnecessary defense. When you make a minor mistake, acknowledge it plainly without adding a lengthy explanation. If you're late, simply say, "I'm late. Sorry." If you spill your coffee, say, "I spilled it." Notice how often the impulse to justify yourself appears. Rather than reacting automatically, pause and ask whether the explanation genuinely helps or whether it is simply an attempt to manage someone else's opinion. This exercise is not about avoiding accountability or refusing to communicate. If an explanation is necessary to solve a problem, protect someone, or maintain trust, give it clearly. The goal is to distinguish between useful communication and reflexive self-justification. Many of us explain ourselves far more often than the situation requires, and as you put this into practice, notice what begins to change. Some conversations may become shorter, certain conflicts may lose their intensity. Most importantly, your own mind may become quieter because you are no longer spending so much energy trying to manage how everyone else perceives you. Genuine confidence is not the absence of mistakes or criticism. It is the ability to remain grounded without feeling compelled to defend your worth every time someone questions it. As in many ways, this is a shift from reacting automatically to responding deliberately. The world will often invite you into unnecessary conflict, reward emotional reactions, and pressure you to justify every decision. You do not have to accept every invitation. Preserve your composure, choose your words carefully, and let your actions speak more often than your explanations. There is strength in restraint, and there is influence in remaining calm when others expect you to lose control. If this perspective on psychology, philosophy, and strategic thinking challenge the way you see human interaction, consider subscribing to the channel. Not because anyone told you to, but because you're interested in developing greater self-mastery, emotional discipline, and a deeper understanding of timeless ideas that help you navigate an increasingly noisy world.